"You can't sit there," the hostess said, without even looking up from her cracked iPad. Elijah paused, one hand still on the back of the booth. The window seat was empty, clean, and clearly available. "I just need a table for one," he said, calm as rain. The hostess shrugged. "That booth's for regulars." He blinked, took a quiet breath. The place was half empty. Most of the staff looked half awake. The only thing regular about this booth was the chipped laminate. "That's fine," Elijah replied, nodding. "Whatever works." She didn't smile, didn't apologize. Just led him to a wobbly table near the kitchen door. No view, close to the dish bin. The smell of fryer oil clung to the air. No one knew that the man they just dismissed, the man they sat next to the trash line, was the one who funded this entire chain. Not yet. But someone in this room, a waitress with tired eyes and a quiet kind of bravery, was about to change everything. And it would all start with 6 handwritten words. "Tell us where you're watching from, and would you have stayed quiet?" He didn't wear a suit that day, just worn jeans, a brown leather jacket that had traveled more miles than most people, and scuffed boots that hadn't seen polish in years. A faded cap shaded his face. Not to hide, just to keep things even. Dr. Elijah Monroe had learned long ago that the best way to find out the truth was to walk in as nobody. That's what today was for. Not an inspection, not a meeting, just a man sitting in a restaurant he quietly funded with $2.4 million in ESG capital. The location, a mid-range steakhouse in Birmingham, Alabama, tucked between a check-cashing spot and a tax service, in a neighborhood that was up and coming for 10 years and never quite made it. The pitch, when they applied for funding, had been strong. Employ local talent, pay living wages, revitalize underserved communities. All the right boxes, all the right buzzwords. But buzzwords didn't explain the labor complaints, or the high turnover, or the sudden drop in community reviews. So Elijah came, quietly. No assistance, no press, no announcement. Just a man ordering steak. The server arrived 5 minutes later. She moved like someone who'd been on her feet since 10 a.m. White, maybe 28. Hair pulled back in a messy bun. No fake smile. Just tired, guarded, professional. "Afternoon. My name's Jenna. I'll be taking care of you." Elijah looked up and met her eyes. "Appreciate it." She handed him a menu. He didn't open it. "What's decent here?" She paused, glanced toward the kitchen. "Ribeye still solid? Collards aren't canned. Mashed potatoes taste real." He nodded. "Let's do that. Medium rare." "Got it." No small talk, no pitchy upsells. She just walked off. Elijah leaned back and scanned the room again. A man stood near the bar, arms crossed, clipboard in hand, buzz-cut hair, tight black polo. Stocky, watching everything, but not like a leader, like a bouncer at a nightclub that no one wanted to be in. That had to be Bryce, the manager. Elijah had reviewed his name once in a quarterly report. Glowing review from the regional director. Interesting. The steak arrived faster than expected. Cooked right. Warm plate. Clearly the kitchen still had pride, or maybe just one good line cook holding it down. Jenna refilled his coffee without saying a word. Then she placed the check on the table, a black leather folder, folded neatly. She didn't linger, didn't look back, just walked away, steady and calm. But Elijah noticed one thing. She didn't bring a pen, which meant she didn't expect him to sign anything. Just read. He waited a beat, sipped his coffee, then opened the folder. Inside, beneath the receipt, was a scrap of paper, folded once, written in blue ink. "If you're who I think, don't leave." 6 words. No name, no accusation, no demand. But everything inside Elijah shifted. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, but across the room, reflected faintly in the window's glare, he saw her. Jenna, watching, not directly, Just enough. She knew, or at least suspected, and she was asking for help the only way it was safe to do so. Elijah didn't react. He didn't need to. Instead, he finished his steak, left cash on the table, tucked the note in his jacket, and walked slowly toward the front. The hostess didn't look up this time, but just before Elijah reached the door, he turned left, into the narrow hallway labeled Employees, Restrooms. The moment he did, a voice called after him. "Sir, restrooms are on the other side." Elijah stopped, turned halfway. "Looking for the manager." A pause. Then the voice replied, flatter now. "That'd be me, Bryce." He stepped out from behind the bar, arms crossed now in a not-so-subtle show of authority. "You have a concern?" he asked. Elijah tilted his head. "Just wanted a word with my server." "That's not how we do things," Bryce said, smiling tight. "If there's an issue, you bring it to me. Staff stay on the floor." Elijah's voice stayed level. "That's going to change." There was a flicker in Bryce's eyes. Recognition? Threat? He didn't press, just said, "She's probably in the back, breaking down prep." Elijah nodded and walked past him. No raised voice, no scene, just the sound of boots on tile. He found Jenna near the prep sink, slicing lemons into a cracked white tub. When she saw him, she froze. "You got it?" she asked quietly. "I did." She looked around, then motioned with her chin toward the supply closet. He followed. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and burnt oil. She shut the door. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "They don't listen. They don't care. People get fired for asking where their hours went." Elijah nodded. "You've been keeping track?" She pulled a folded napkin from her apron. Inside, a silver key. Taped behind the fire extinguisher. His locker. There's a black duffel bag. A second phone, maybe more. "Why now?" Elijah asked. She exhaled. "Because I remembered your face. From Tuscaloosa, years ago. You tipped me $100 just for noticing a customer was choking before anyone else did." Elijah blinked. "I remember." Jenna swallowed. "I knew then you weren't like the others. That's why I wrote the note." He looked at her, not like a CEO, but like someone who understood. Really understood. "Thank you," he said simply. She nodded, but her voice trembled. "You should go out the side. He watches the front camera." "I'm not done yet." She gave a soft smile, more pain than humor. "Didn't think you were." Elijah slipped the key into his jacket. Before he stepped out, he looked back. "You going to be all right?" She didn't hesitate. "I've made it this far." And with that, Elijah Monroe, the man they sat near the kitchen, walked out the back door, straight into a night that suddenly felt charged. Tomorrow, he'd be back, but not as a stranger. This time, he was coming as the man who wrote the code they broke, and he wasn't leaving quietly. The next morning, Elijah woke to the sound of cheap motel pipes banging through the wall like a warning. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the silver key Jenna had given him, taped behind the fire extinguisher. Black duffel bag. Second phone. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt surgical. This wasn't the first time Elijah had dealt with rot beneath polished surfaces, but it was the first time the rot wore his company's name. He dressed the same as yesterday, same boots, same jacket, same cap, because this wasn't a new day. It was unfinished business. By 10:56 a.m., he was parked 2 blocks away from the restaurant. Sunlight was bouncing off windshields like it had something to prove. He waited until the lunch crowd started to build, not rush hour, but enough movement to blend in. At 11:04, he stepped inside. Same young hostess, same cracked iPad. No greeting this time, just a half-lifted chin and a flick of 2 fingers toward an open booth. "Back again?" the hostess asked. Elijah smiled lightly. "One of those weeks." He sat near the same spot, facing the kitchen. Not hungry, not today. This wasn't about steak anymore. It was about proof. Jenna passed him once with a tray of glasses. Their eyes met briefly. No nods, no smiles. Just recognition. Across the room, Bryce emerged from the back, clipboard in hand again. Same fake posture, same wide stance. This time, though, his eyes locked onto Elijah the moment he stepped into view. And something was different. Not panic, but a flicker of something close. Doubt. He walked over. "Well, look who's back," Bryce said, smile thinner than before. "Didn't expect you to be a regular." "Food was solid," Elijah replied smoothly. "Wanted to see if it held up 2 days in a row." "Well, if you got any feedback, I'm all ears. I run a tight ship here." Elijah didn't blink. "I can tell." Bryce lingered a second too long, then walked off, but not without glancing over his shoulder. He knew something was off. Elijah waited 10 minutes. No steak, no order, just coffee. Enough to keep up appearances. Then, when the moment was right, he slipped toward the side hallway again. Slow, steady, unbothered. The mop bucket propped open the supply door. Same as yesterday. Jenna's quiet signal. He stepped into the back hallway. Stainless steel prep tables. Boxes of lemons. Fridge humming. Nobody around. Elijah walked down the corridor until he reached the locker room. It smelled like old cologne and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. A soda fridge moaned in the corner. There it was. Tall, dented, labeled BL in peeling label tape. Bryce Langley. He slipped the key in. Soft click. The locker swung open. Black gym bag, a pair of extra polos, half-used cologne bottle. And there, tucked in the side pocket, was a plain black burner phone. No case, no lock screen, just access. Elijah scrolled. Contacts saved by initials. GT, LM, HQ, WED. No names, but plenty of messages. "That cut was too deep. Back it off next week. Optics. Invoice from Stoneworth padded 18%. Push it through. Tell Bryce to rotate staff again. Jenna's asking questions." His jaw tightened. Jenna wasn't just paranoid. She was right. He took out his phone and started snapping photos. Message by message. Screen by screen. Then he checked the duffel bag's outer pocket. And found it. Cash. Rolled tight with rubber bands. Dozens of small bills. Unlabeled. Unreported. No manager kept that much loose change unless something was being skimmed. Then, one shelf lower, tucked beneath a sweat towel, a thin black notebook. He opened it. Inventory logs, names, shift notes, manual hour entries scratched out and rewritten, liquor counts circled in red, tips adjusted down, hours rounded back, the paper version of the crime. He had everything he needed. But before he could close the locker, the door creaked. Elijah turned. Bryce. No smile this time. No clipboard. Just a man standing in a doorway he thought belonged to him. "You think you're slick," Bryce said. Elijah didn't flinch. Didn't move. "I should have known the way you walked in here. You didn't look scared enough to be some random customer." "I'm not," Elijah said. Voice calm. "Never was." Bryce stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "You broke into my locker. That's theft. You're not walking out of here like this didn't happen." Elijah held the ledger in one hand. "I'm not walking out as a customer," he said. Bryce narrowed his eyes. "I'm walking out as the man who signed the funding that kept this place open." Bryce blinked, took half a step back. Elijah stepped forward. "You've been stealing. Cooking books, threatening staff, hiding behind tight shirts and tighter lies." "You don't know what you're talking about," Bryce snapped. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," Elijah said, firmer now. "Because I wrote the protocol this restaurant swore it would follow. And you've broken every clause." "You want to call the cops?" Bryce scoffed. "Go ahead. We'll see who they believe." Elijah smiled faintly. "I'm not calling the cops." He slipped the phone and ledger into his jacket. "I'm calling me." And with that, he walked past Bryce without touching him. No rush, no fear. Because the truth wasn't in his pocket. It was in the silence behind Bryce's stare. Back at the motel, Elijah spread everything across the desk. Photos, screenshots, the ledger, his own notes. At 3:12 p.m., he opened his laptop and logged into the secure system, REDLOCK Core. He designed it 3 years ago, a digital backbone of ethics enforcement across 12 ESG funds and 41 cities. Most people thought it was just another compliance dashboard. They had no idea what it could actually do. Elijah tapped in his credentials. The dashboard lit up. He hovered over one button, flag as non-compliant. A box popped up. Are you sure you want to trigger REDLOCK Protocol for South Point Hospitality Group, Region 4? This will freeze all ESG funding associated with entity, alert 12 partner funds and 41 municipalities, temporarily delist group from all ethics indexes, initiate 7-day ethics audit across all locations. Elijah didn't hesitate. He clicked yes. The screen blinked once. Then again. REDLOCK activated. The wave had begun. 30 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He picked up. Dr. Monroe? A voice said, stiff, uneasy. This is Harlan Keyes, the man continued. Regional Director, South Point Hospitality Group. Elijah didn't answer. We received a notice. Some kind of ethics flag. There must be a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Elijah said. Look, Harlan stammered. We can talk. No need to escalate. This could damage the entire... Elijah cut him off. You let Bryce Langley run that store like a war camp. You ignored every internal report. And now you want grace? Silence. You'll get your chance, Elijah said. During the audit. He ended the call. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. That evening, Jenna stepped outside for her break and found an envelope taped to the back door. No name. Just one word. Thank you. Inside, a note and a prepaid legal voucher for whistleblower protection. She stared at it for a full minute, then folded it into her apron and walked back inside. Something had shifted. Not just in policy or funding, but in the air. The kind of shift you can't see, but you feel in your spine. Because somewhere out there, the man they treated like nobody had just pushed the first domino, and now the system was about to fall. By the time Elijah stepped out of his motel room the next morning, REDLOCK had already begun to ripple. Emails, notifications, escalation flags. 12 ESG funds were now reviewing Region 4. 4 partner cities had quietly suspended their next capital disbursements. The chain Elijah had once endorsed as a community-first model, South Point Hospitality Group, had been flagged across the Ethos Core network, and Bryce Langley didn't even know yet. Not officially. Elijah hadn't walked into that restaurant just to expose one bad manager. He came to measure the depth of the damage and to reset the standard. At 10:37 a.m., he pulled into the same parking lot. This time, he didn't stop 2 blocks away. He parked right out front. The hostess wasn't there when he walked in. The shift was changing. Kitchen noise louder now, orders being yelled, plates clattering, staff moving with nervous energy. Jenna saw him first. Her eyes widened for half a second, then settled. Not surprised, just ready. She approached without a smile, without small talk, just a low voice. You okay? Elijah nodded. You? She gave the faintest shrug. Depends what today brings. He handed her an envelope. No name, just a corner folded twice. What's this? She asked. Legal protection, and my direct line. If anyone tries anything, you don't call HR, you call me. Jenna hesitated, then slipped the envelope into her apron. You stirred the pot, she said. Elijah smiled faintly. I didn't stir it. I just stopped pretending it wasn't boiling. He sat at the same booth. Didn't order anything. Just observed. And within minutes, the shift hit the room. The kitchen line moved faster. The staff spoke in shorter sentences. Even the music, some pop playlist humming low, felt tenser. Then Bryce emerged from the back. But this time, he wasn't faking charm. No clipboard, No tight manager smile. Just stiff posture and a walk that tried too hard to seem in control. He stopped 2 booths away, stared at Elijah like he was trying to solve a puzzle he'd seen before, but couldn't quite finish. "You got a minute?" Bryce asked. Elijah leaned back. "Sure." Bryce slid into the opposite side of the booth, uninvited. "You've been asking around," Bryce said. "I've been listening." Bryce exhaled sharply. "Look, I don't know who you are, but this thing you're doing, it's reckless." "This thing," Elijah echoed. "You mean checking payroll fraud? Illegal tip deductions? Stashed cash? That thing?" Bryce's jaw worked side to side. "I run a tight ship." "No," Elijah said calmly. "You run a fearful one." Bryce leaned in slightly. "I don't know what you think you've got, but whatever it is, it won't last. You're not from around here, and you're poking at things you don't understand." Elijah's tone didn't change. "I wrote the code you're violating." Bryce blinked. "What?" "I'm not just a funder. I'm the architect of REDLOCK, the ethics enforcement protocol this chain is legally bound to uphold." Now Bryce's face changed. Color drained. The words finally sank in. "You activated it?" he whispered. Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. Bryce stood abruptly. "You're going to ruin lives." "No," Elijah said quietly. "You already did that. I'm just turning the lights on." Back in the kitchen, Jenna passed him a folded napkin before his coffee refill. Inside were 3 names. Staff members who had either quit or been pushed out after asking questions. Mariah, server, fired for insubordination after asking for back pay. Chris, line cook, saw cash go missing, shift cut 2 weeks later. Devontae, busser, told Bryce he was going to HR, never saw him again. Elijah folded the napkin into his jacket. He didn't speak. He was already planning. That evening, a regional group chat buzzed. Managers across the South Point system started whispering. "Anyone else get an audit notice? Funding locked on my end. What the hell is REDLOCK?" Bryce says someone's messing with the books. Says it's some investor. Quiet guy. Shut it. Legal said no emails, no texts, nothing in writing. Too late. He already saw it. Elijah read every message, because he still had the burner phone. By 9:40 p.m., a silver SUV with out-of-state plates pulled into the back of the Birmingham location. Out stepped Harlan Keyes, the regional director. Tan suit, cheap briefcase. That forced confidence most corporate men wear when they know they've lost the plot. He marched through the side door like he still owned the place. Found Bryce in the back office. "You told me this guy was just a walk-in," Harlan hissed. Bryce shrugged. He looked like nothing. Harlan's voice dropped. "He's not nothing. He's Monroe. Elijah Monroe. Harbor Vest. REDLOCK." Now Bryce swallowed. Hard. "He's here?" Harlan asked. "In the dining room." Harlan rubbed his face. "You let him sit out there after everything?" Bryce tried to speak. Couldn't. "You don't understand," Harlan muttered. "This man designed the entire ethics compliance chain the feds are watching. If he pushes, our entire audit record and the partner funds go with it." Bryce stood there, silent. Harlan shook his head. "You brought fire into the building and then handed it gasoline." Elijah didn't leave that night. He waited until closing, then met with the staff, all of them. Jenna stood beside him in the dining room, arms folded, sleeves rolled, eyes steady. "I know you're all scared," Elijah said. No one spoke. No one moved. "I would be too. But here's what's true. Fear only lasts as long as silence does." Still quiet. "Tomorrow, Bryce is gone. I've already pulled his access. By end of week, regional oversight is shifting. And starting next month, every employee will be given access to a secure, anonymous ethics hotline, monitored directly through REDLOCK." A few heads lifted. "The money that was stolen from you, the tips, the hours, the wages, you'll be repaid. Fully." Now they looked at each other. "I can't undo what was done, but I can stop it from ever happening again." Jenna stepped forward. "And he means it. I risked my job to speak up. and for the first time, I don't regret it." There was no applause, but there was relief. Shoulders dropped, eyes softened. A busser in the corner started quietly crying. Because when you've worked too long for too little under too much pressure, sometimes the best sound in the world is someone else finally saying, "Enough." Outside, as Elijah locked his car door, Jenna caught up to him. "Do you ever get used to this?" she asked. He glanced at her. "What? Fixing broken systems?" "No," she said, being the only one in the room willing to say the truth. Elijah looked out over the dark parking lot. "You never get used to it," he said. "You just stop apologizing for it." She nodded, teeth clenched slightly against the cold. "Then I guess I better get used to not apologizing." Elijah smiled. "You're ahead of schedule." Back in Atlanta, his phone buzzed as he entered his apartment. A message from one of the REDLOCK Partner Fund directors. "We saw what you did. We need to talk about scaling this. It's bigger than one chain now." Elijah stared at the screen. Bigger than one chain? He already knew that. He'd known that the moment he read Jenna's 6 words. "If you're who I think, don't leave." He hadn't. And now, neither would the truth. The next 72 hours felt like a fuse had been lit across the Southeast. By Monday morning, 6 other locations under South Point Hospitality Group had quietly lost access to their capital disbursement system. 3 cities, Mobile, Tallahassee, and Chattanooga, issued soft suspensions of municipal partnership agreements, and $14.7 million in ethics-linked ESG funds were frozen pending investigation, all from a 6-word napkin. "If you're who I think, don't leave." At Harbor Vest's headquarters in Atlanta, Elijah sat in a private conference room with 2 screens in front of him. One showed real-time REDLOCK alerts. The other was muted, playing a local news broadcast from Birmingham. The Chiron read, "Alabama steakhouse chain under federal ethics review. Staff allege wage theft, discrimination, and tip skimming. Whistleblower protections now active." He took a slow breath. It had begun. Not the media storm. That was inevitable. The accountability, the reckoning, the shift. Later that afternoon, the REDLOCK core team gathered in the main operations room. Analysts, legal advisors, and partner liaisons. Every screen showed new flags. Testimonial uploads, scanned receipts, emails from whistleblowers. "Where's this one from?" Elijah asked, pointing to a flagged video. "Greenville, manager screaming at a busboy for clocking in 5 minutes early. Fired him in front of a full dining room." Another flag blinked red. "What's that?" "Savannah, same script, different face. Tip skimming again." Elijah leaned forward. "Start compiling witness overlap. I want a heat map by tomorrow, and make sure Jenna's name is redacted from all outbound correspondence." One of the analysts looked up. "She's the waitress?" "She's the spark," Elijah said. "You don't put the match in front of the wind." That night, he received a call from an unfamiliar number. He didn't answer. A minute later, a text came through. "This is Bryce. I know you got what you wanted. I just want to talk." He ignored it. Then came another message. "I'll go public. You think you've won, but this was personal. I'll say you targeted me." Elijah stared at the screen for a long beat, then replied, "You stole wages from single mothers and undocumented kids. You don't get to say what's personal anymore." And then blocked the number. The following morning, a national ethics blog published a leak from an anonymous staffer at REDLOCK. The man behind the freeze was dining in their booth. Within hours, Elijah's name was trending on social platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Threads, Medium. He was undercover? The CEO himself activated the shutdown? How do we get this system in every restaurant chain? Requests started pouring in. From small city governments, from worker coalitions, from 3 senators' offices, all asking the same thing. How do we bring REDLOCK to our city, our state, our system? But Elijah didn't care about the noise. He cared about Jenna. He met her 2 days later at a quiet cafe in West End. No press, no staff, just them. She sat across from him in a hoodie and jeans. No makeup, no performance, just raw. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly. "No," Elijah said, "but I couldn't not." She stirred her tea. "After you left the other night, some of the staff, they cried. One girl said it was the first time she felt seen in 2 years. "That's the real audit," Elijah said. "Everything else is paperwork." Jenna hesitated, then slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. It was a resume, hers. "I want in," she said. "Whatever this is, Redlock, Harbor Vest, ethics. I don't want to serve tables anymore. I want to help stop this from happening again." Elijah looked at the paper. "Why now?" he asked. She took a breath. "Because I used to think silence was safer. But after I wrote that note, I slept through the night for the first time in months." He nodded. "Come to Atlanta next week. Meet the team. I'll have HR call you." She smiled. Tired, unsure, but real. And for the first time, hope felt louder than fear. That evening, Elijah opened his personal email. Subject: External Joint Statement Draft. Redlock Reform Proposal. Inside was a document co-authored by 3 municipal mayors and a U.S. ethics coalition. They wanted to propose a national expansion of Redlock tied to ESG funding thresholds. And they wanted Elijah to speak before Congress. He closed the laptop gently, then stared out the window at the Atlanta skyline. He had come into a steakhouse with a quiet hunger, not for food, for truth. And now, truth had teeth. They were cornered, and now they wanted fire. In a cramped office in Montgomery, Bryce Callahan sat with 3 of his old network partners, men who had profited for years under his quiet loyalty model. Now, their accounts were frozen, franchises were flagged, and they were bleeding in public. "This is getting out of hand," one of them hissed. "I had a supplier back out yesterday, said ethical exposure made us too high risk." Another slammed his fist on the table. "Elijah Monroe wants to play God with our livelihood? He doesn't know who we know." Bryce stayed quiet, but his eyes narrowed. He did know who they knew, but more importantly, they had no idea who Elijah really was working with. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Elijah sat across from Jenna in the Harbor Vest policy room. She had just walked him through a handwritten shift schedule from last year. Each name had a color-coded mark beside it: red for fired, blue for forced out, black for workers who had reported harassment, and then, mysteriously, had no shows logged against them. "This is what they did to Dana," Jenna said, her voice tight. "She was a single mom with a 6-year-old, worked doubles. Then one day, Bryce said her drawer came up short, fired her on the spot." "Did she ever contest it?" Elijah asked. "She tried. They claimed she forged her time card. The manager she appealed to was his cousin." Elijah exhaled. This wasn't just a toxic workplace. It was a pipeline of exploitation. And now that Redlock had triggered exposure, they were scrambling to bury what they'd done. By Thursday, the counterattack began. Bryce went on a local talk radio station in Birmingham. "What's happening here is a coordinated takedown by people with personal vendettas. I welcomed Mr. Monroe as a guest. I had no idea he'd weaponize a private dinner. And I certainly never mistreated any employee. These claims are orchestrated." He sounded calm, reasonable, even remorseful. But Elijah knew the performance. And Jenna? She watched the clip in silence and then said flatly, "I'll testify, publicly. You don't get to gaslight an entire generation of workers and walk away smiling." That afternoon, Elijah received a file from Redlock's internal audit team. It was a compilation of security footage, pay stubs, and text messages between franchise managers. At the center of it all, Bryce. In one message, a manager in Nashville wrote, "Got a kid here complaining about skipped breaks again. Should I ghost her like the last one?" Bryce replied, "You know the play. Quiet them or replace them. No repeats." Another message showed Bryce instructing a GM to scrub Jenna's hours retroactively, 2 weeks before her termination. There it was. The pattern. The proof. And suddenly, what was once rumor became a case. Friday morning, Elijah walked into a joint meeting with HarborVest Legal and a civil rights law firm. He brought Jenna with him. She wore black slacks, a blazer 2 sizes too big, and a quiet steel in her shoulders. "I'm not doing this for revenge," she said, before anyone could ask. "I'm doing it so the next girl doesn't have to write a napkin and hope someone notices." They gave her the floor, and for 23 minutes, Jenna laid out names, incidents, dates, voices. All of it burned into memory. When she was done, the room was silent. One of the lawyers finally said, "Miss Holt, would you consider going on record as the formal whistleblower for this case?" Jenna nodded, then added, "On one condition." "What's that?" "I don't want hush money. I want a job, somewhere where this can't happen again." Elijah smiled. "You already have one." By sunset, the first official federal ethics complaint was filed against South Point Hospitality Group. Bryce's photo, once polished and proud, was now clipped next to the word investigation and redlock. Redlock was just getting started. By the following Monday, the story had outgrown Birmingham. It had outgrown steak. It had become something else. The redlock effect. 4 more restaurant chains had quietly reached out to HarborVest, asking for private audits. 3 corporate HR departments scheduled emergency retraining calls with their franchise managers. And by noon, the phrase "silent dignity reform" trended at number 3 on Threads. Elijah didn't say a word publicly, but the system was speaking for him. At 9:42 a.m., Bryce Callahan was officially suspended by South Point's board, pending internal review. The announcement was buried deep in a press release about organizational realignment. But workers saw it. Jenna saw it. And when she read the sentence aloud, she didn't celebrate. She exhaled, like someone finally putting down a backpack after carrying it uphill for years. "They're not done," she said quietly. "They're going to spin it like he's just one bad apple. But the barrel's been leaking for a decade." Elijah nodded. "And that's why we're not stopping at Apple." At Redlock headquarters, the dashboard was glowing. Green markers meant resolved cases. Red meant open investigations. Yellow meant cooperation pending. The South Point map was bleeding red. But something new had started blinking. A purple marker. Washington, D.C. Elijah clicked it open. It was a formal letter, encrypted and signed by a Congressional Ethics Committee chair. "We request your presence at a special subcommittee hearing on systemic wage exploitation and ethics-linked capital structures." Attached was a PDF titled, "The Redlock Proposal, Draft Framework for National Adaptation." 2 days later, Elijah stood alone in a private room at Union Station, staring out the window at Capitol Hill. Jenna was flying in that night. Not to testify, not yet, but to witness, to see the things she helped ignite become real. She had already started a new role at HarborVest, quietly reviewing ethics files with a calm Elijah had never seen before. It wasn't confidence, it was clarity. She was never just a waitress, Elijah had told his team. She was an archivist, a silent historian of injustice. And now, her footnote was becoming federal. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Bryce wasn't staying quiet. He had hired a crisis PR firm, paid a lawyer to release a counter-narrative blog post, framing the Redlock freeze as retaliation by an overreaching billionaire. He even tried to book an appearance on a conservative podcast, but was dropped at the last minute once the producers saw the internal emails. But the desperation showed, and every move he made just reminded the public of one thing. He was the man who got taken down by a napkin. Elijah walked into the Senate hearing room on a Thursday morning in a tailored charcoal suit. No entourage, no press briefing, just the quiet weight of knowing this moment wasn't about him. It was about what came after. Senator Lee opened the session. "Mr. Monroe, thank you for being here. We understand you didn't seek publicity, but your actions have led to measurable impact on corporate accountability. labor dignity, and ESG fund deployment strategy. We want to understand what REDLOCK actually is." Elijah spoke clearly, plainly. REDLOCK is a trigger protocol. When patterns of labor abuse are confirmed through independent audit, the system temporarily freezes dispersal of ESG-linked funds and flags the network for internal review. It doesn't punish. It pauses. It doesn't accuse. It reveals. It doesn't replace due process. It accelerates it. One senator raised an eyebrow. "You're saying this wasn't personal?" "No," Elijah said. "But I was hungry." Pause. The room leaned in. Hungry for a system where silence didn't pay better than integrity. The testimony lasted 3 hours. By the end of the day, 2 more senators had co-sponsored the REDLOCK federal ethics expansion bill. And Elijah? He walked out without giving interviews. No press line, just one sentence to a Capitol intern who held the door open. "Thank you. We all work for someone." That night, Jenna sat on the rooftop of their hotel, looking out at DC lights, holding a copy of the Napkin, now laminated and framed. "It's surreal," she whispered. "It was supposed to be a note. Now it's a movement." Elijah took the seat beside her. "No," he said. "It was always a movement. It just needed someone to write it down." The moment REDLOCK made headlines, it was only a matter of time before someone tried to break into it. Not physically, but politically, systemically. And that someone was Linton Morrow, CEO of Crestmont Capital, the second largest private equity firm in the ESG space. He had $4.3 billion parked across 19 chains, now under REDLOCK watch. Too much to ignore. Too much to lose. His plan wasn't loud. It never is with men like him. It was elegant, quiet, measured. He'd been around long enough to know. When you can't beat the trigger, corrupt the trigger holder. Jenna Holt found the first sign of it on a routine REDLOCK ethics clearance sync. At first, it looked like a timing bug. A batch of ethics scores, normally refreshed every 72 hours, had been manually reset to green just 24 hours after audit. That wasn't protocol. She clicked deeper into the logs. All clearance IDs pointed back to a reviewer named Nathan Rowe, a mid-level clearance engineer in REDLOCK's outsourced compliance unit. He had access, but not override authority, unless someone gave it to him. Jenna didn't call Elijah right away. She knew he was still in back-to-back calls with the Senate advisory team, preparing the legislative framework for REDLOCK's expansion. Instead, she pinged a private Slack thread marked Silent Threads, Internal Ethics Irregularities. She attached the screenshot and a short message. "This score reset doesn't line up. Either we've been infiltrated or someone's selling override rights." Within 3 hours, IT traced the issue back to an external session log. IP matched to Crestmont's Dallas office. That's when she called Elijah. He answered on the first ring. "Talk to me," he said. "We've been touched," Jenna said flatly. Elijah didn't need clarification. He'd seen this play before. "When?" "Looks like 2 days ago. They rerouted the audit paths through an old ethics gateway node, disabled alerts. Very intentional." He went silent. Then, "Is it reversible?" Jenna hesitated. "Yes, but if they touched REDLOCK once, they'll try again. And if the ethics charter gets compromised before Congress votes?" She didn't need to finish. Elijah already knew. This wasn't about one restaurant anymore. This was a war over who gets to define the rules. The next morning, Elijah convened a private invite-only call with his internal ethics team. Only 5 people. Jenna, 2 REDLOCK engineers, 1 former SEC investigator, and a man named Jonas Crowley, ex-CIA, now head of breach mitigation at Harbor Vest. He spoke first. "I ran the signature again. The override patch was inserted using a ghost key. That's not random. It's someone who's worked inside REDLOCK or funded the development from outside." Elijah leaned forward. "You think it's Morrow?" Jonas nodded. "Either him or someone on his direct strategy team. Crestmont has the technical ability and motive. You froze $1.3 billion of his pending ESG deployment last week." Jenna added, And now he's trying to flip the narrative. He's funding think tanks to say Redlock's killing small business. He's working the back rooms. But Elijah wasn't rattled. He was ready. He pulled a black notebook from his side drawer and flipped to a tab marked Protocol Zeta. "If they want to play games," he said, "we'll give them one." That night, Elijah and Jenna quietly initiated a controlled ethics reversal test across 3 unrelated Redlock-monitored businesses. Each one passed its audit. Each score was confirmed. No false resets, which meant the system still worked, if untouched. Then Elijah initiated the Echo Lock, a silent surveillance trigger that recorded all override attempts in real time, without notifying the user. Within 48 hours, 3 more override attempts came from the same Crestmont-linked IP range, 2 disguised through dummy LLCs. They were scrubbing failed ethics audits for food delivery chains with known labor violations. It was enough. Elijah had what he needed. By Friday, a formal Redlock report, titled Tamper Protocol, Unauthorized Score Manipulation in Ethics Infrastructure, landed on the desks of the Senate Ethics Subcommittee, the SEC, and the Department of Labor. Attached was a short memo. This breach attempt was not accidental. It was strategic, calculated, and funded. We request an immediate joint investigation into ESG abuse and override for hire models tied to Crestmont Capital and related actors. Linton Morrow didn't expect it to go public. He expected silence. Instead, he woke up Saturday morning to see his name trending number 2 on Threads. Override Empire worse, the story had legs. Because the leak hadn't come from Elijah. It had come from Jenna. She had quietly sent an encrypted version of the audit logs to a former co-worker, now a labor reporter at the Washington Tribune. She didn't need credit. She needed it exposed. And when Elijah found out, he didn't scold her. He sent her one message. "You did the right thing." This was never just about steak. The same day, multiple federal agencies announced an inquiry into Crestmont Capital's ESG reporting practices. Morrow's legal team went on full lockdown. He issued a terse 9-word press release. "We deny all wrongdoing. We will fully cooperate." But it was too late. The ethics war had gone public, and for the first time in years, people weren't just asking where their food came from. They were asking who paid to make silence possible. The Capitol hearing room was fuller than usual, not just staffers and senators, but students, reporters, even a few restaurant workers flown in on pro bono tickets. Everyone had heard about Redlock, and everyone wanted to see the woman who started it. Not Elijah. Her. Jenna Holt stepped into the room without makeup, wearing a navy blouse and blazer. No designer anything, just presence. Her laminated copy of the Napkin stayed in her bag. She didn't need to hold it. She was it. The room quieted as she took her seat behind the witness table beside Elijah, whose hands were calmly folded, like a man watching a torch finally pass to its rightful owner. Senator Lee tapped her mic. "Ms. Holt, you're not a lawyer, correct?" "No, ma'am." "You're not a lobbyist?" "No." "You're a waitress." Jenna met her eyes, calm, steady. "I was." What followed was one of the shortest and most powerful testimonies ever given in that room. No theatrics, no dramatic speeches, just this. "I didn't plan to start anything. I wrote what I saw. I was tired of watching people cry in the break room, tired of managers cutting pay without telling us, tired of fake smiles just to keep our jobs. I didn't know who he was when I handed him the note, but I knew I couldn't stay silent one more shift." She paused, then added, "It was just a napkin. But the truth sticks, even when it's folded." Elijah didn't say a word the whole time. He just watched. This wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. As the hearing ended, reporters tried to crowd Jenna, but she politely waved them off. One young aide approached her, though, and asked, "Ms. Holt, what happens now?" Jenna smiled. Now we clean house." That same afternoon, the Senate Ethics Subcommittee voted 7-2 in favor of the Redlock Expansion Act, giving the platform provisional federal clearance as a national pilot. This meant REDLOCK would now monitor all ESG-linked federal contracts above $25 million. Ethics score manipulation became a federal offense, and REDLOCK protocols would be reviewed quarterly by an independent civilian board, chaired by none other than Jenna Holt. Back at Harbor Vest headquarters, Elijah stood with Jonas Crowley, reviewing the final REDLOCK patch that sealed off override backdoors for good. "We built this to protect capital," Jonas said. Elijah shook his head. "No, we built it to protect conscience. Capital just happened to listen." Jonas half smiled. "You ever think about stepping back?" Elijah looked toward the glass wall, where Jenna was on a Zoom call with 4 regional ethics managers. "She's already stepping in." 3 days later, Linton Morrow resigned as CEO of Crestmont Capital. But not before his emails were subpoenaed. Not before it was revealed he paid $780,000 to a third-party consulting group that specialized in algorithmic audit flexibility, code for ethics tampering. And not before 3 of his portfolio restaurants shuttered operations following walkouts inspired by Jenna's testimony. No tweets, no statements. He vanished like a man who never believed the system would hold him accountable, until it did. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to ripple across the country. Napkin copies. Thousands of workers in food service, hospitality, and retail started scribbling stories on napkins, receipts, anything they could find, and mailing them anonymously to Harbor Vest. Some were short. "Manager took half my tips last month." Others were brutal. "I miscarried during my shift. They told me to mop the blood." Elijah's team opened a folder called The Unfolding. Jenna cried the first time she saw it. "It's not a movement," she whispered. "It's a reckoning." A week later, Jenna and Elijah returned to Birmingham, not for a press conference, but for a quiet meeting with a new investor group. Harbor Vest had just approved a new fund, the Silent Dignity Portfolio. $120 million set aside for worker-owned food and hospitality ventures. And the first location to receive support? The same restaurant where it all started. Now renamed the Napkin Table. Jenna insisted on it. As they stood outside the remodeled space, a teenage girl with a curly ponytail and apron opened the door. "You two coming in? We got steak," she grinned. Jenna laughed. "Only if I can write something on a napkin first." Elijah smiled and nodded. This time, it wouldn't be a warning. It would be a welcome. Let them sit wherever they want. Let them eat with dignity. 6 weeks after REDLOCK went national, everything seemed like it was working. Scores were stabilizing. Public trust was growing. Senators were publicly praising the Holt effect. But beneath the surface, a new danger had started to take shape. Not sabotage, not corruption. Worse. Performance theater. Jenna noticed it first during a surprise visit to a restaurant in Chicago. They had one of the highest ethics scores in the REDLOCK network. Too high. From the outside, everything checked out. Smiling staff, clean tables, a manager with a firm handshake and a Harvard Business School mug on his desk. But halfway through lunch, something felt off. One of the servers, Shay, never made eye contact. She flinched when the manager walked past. Her smile was glued on. When Jenna asked for extra napkins, Shay leaned in and whispered, "They only act nice when someone from REDLOCK shows up." Then she dropped a receipt folded 3 times. Inside was a single line. "We're trained to say the right things. Please don't trust the scores." That night, Jenna didn't sleep. She paced her small apartment in Atlanta, flipping through REDLOCK's most recent audit batch. None of it made sense. How could ethics scores be so high if staff felt this unsafe? She called Elijah at 1:23 a.m. He answered on the second ring. "I was hoping I was wrong," she said. He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. By morning, Elijah had pulled audit data from 47 top-rated businesses across the country. And something was wrong. Over 60% had ethics scores above 90, yet staff turnover rates were 3x the national average. And most of the positive feedback came from internal survey templates. Templates written by the management teams themselves. "This is REDLOCK theater," Elijah muttered. Jenna looked stunned. They're gaming the system, not by hacking, but by learning how to look ethical. And that, Elijah said quietly, is more dangerous than corruption. They called an emergency meeting with the REDLOCK Oversight Board the next morning. Jonas Crowley, who'd been running counterintelligence for the platform, presented his findings. At least 19 companies now employ compliance actors, part-time staff brought in for audits. Some train permanent employees on how to perform well during inspections. Others stage fake positive interactions for surveillance reviews. There's even a consulting firm in Austin advertising audit playbooks for REDLOCK scoring. Jenna sat in silence, then finally asked, "What do we do when they turn ethics into theater?" No one answered, because no one had ever planned for this. That night, Jenna drafted a private memo. From ethics to optics, the rise of the clean lie. She didn't send it to Elijah. She needed to test it first. So she flew back to Birmingham, to the Napkin table. No press, no staff warning. She simply walked in, ordered a coffee, and sat quietly by the window. She watched the staff interact, watched who looked exhausted, who looked real. Then she walked into the break room. One server blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, I didn't know you were visiting." Jenna smiled. "That's the point." She looked around. No training posters, no cue cards, just a beat-up corkboard filled with actual notes, messages of support, ideas, apologies, handwritten and thumbtacked like a wall of living honesty. She knew then, this was the blueprint. The next week, she presented her solution to the REDLOCK board. "We don't need to change the tech. We need to change how we listen. The system should reward not just clean performance, but vulnerability. From now on, any business with a REDLOCK score above 90 will be subject to silent audits. No warning, no prep. Second, we're creating a worker echo board, a panel of frontline employees from across industries, rotating quarterly, who will review audit patterns and identify red flags that machines miss. And third," she finished, "we're banning any third-party consulting firm from offering REDLOCK optimization training. Any business caught using one will face immediate ethics review." There was pushback, of course. Several executives warned about excessive oversight. Some threatened to pull REDLOCK from their compliance stacks. But Elijah backed her. "All systems are flawed," he said. "But if your only problem with this upgrade is that you'll get caught performing, maybe you were never ethical to begin with." The vote passed, unanimously. 2 weeks later, REDLOCK ran its first unannounced ethics audit under the new policy. Jenna watched it from her laptop at home. One of the top-rated chains failed in under 6 minutes. The surveillance AI caught a manager threatening to dock tips, a staff member being timed in the bathroom, and a forced volunteer shift scheduled off the books. The company's score dropped 42 points in a single day. Within hours, REDLOCK was trending again, but this time, not as a watchdog, as a mirror. "The system doesn't punish imperfection," Jenna tweeted. "It punishes the lie that it's not there." That same night, Jenna returned home to find a package on her doorstep. No return address. Inside, folded once, was a plain white napkin. On it, "I left last month. I didn't speak up then, but I see what you're doing, and it matters. Thank you." No name, just the initials, MJ. Jenna sat on her steps for a long time. Quiet. Still. She thought about Elijah, about Shay, about every whisper that never made it to a microphone. And she thought, maybe power doesn't corrupt. Maybe it just reveals who really wants to stay clean. The National Ethics Charter was set to be signed in less than 48 hours. 3 federal agencies, 12 major ESG investment firms, 41 participating cities, and one name, Jenna Holt, stamped across the front page as co-author. It should have been a moment of pride, but instead, she sat frozen at her desk, reading the email. From Senator Alicia Grant. Subject: Urgent. Please confirm this is not you. Attached, a blurry screenshot. A woman who looked exactly like Jenna. Same frame, same hair, smiling behind a restaurant counter. Beside her, a white man in a polo shirt. Underneath, the caption, "Jenna Holt, former assistant manager of Bridgepoint Cafe, fired after tip theft cover-up 2017. Her stomach dropped. Not because it was true, but because she remembered the day clearly. Back in 2017, before she worked tables, before the Napkin, she had been promoted to assistant manager for 6 weeks. Bridgepoint was understaffed, and Jenna stepped in to help. But 2 weeks into the role, a regional manager, Chad Winslow, pressured her to sign off on altered tip sheets to smooth out payroll. She refused. Then one night, the safe came up short, $620 missing. And suddenly, Jenna was blamed. No due process, no questions, just "thank you for your service," and a quiet exit out the back. She thought it was behind her, but now someone had dredged it up, twisted it, weaponized it, and worst of all, it was hitting the press before the charter even launched. Elijah called the moment he saw the story break on social media. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," Jenna lied. "I already contacted the legal team. They're issuing a statement clarifying the timeline." "No." Her voice was firmer than he expected. "No," he repeated. "I don't want to hide from this. I want to tell it myself." The next morning, just hours before the signing, Jenna held a press conference. No podium, no handler, just her, a mic, and the truth. "In 2017, I was fired from a job I didn't steal from. I didn't fight it. I didn't sue. Because like a lot of people in service jobs, I thought silence was survival. I didn't realize then that silence was what systems count on to keep power unchecked. I became a waitress after that. And 5 years later, I handed someone a napkin. That napkin didn't erase what happened to me. It just proved that I could still choose honesty over fear." She paused, then looked directly into the camera. "You don't need a perfect record to believe in ethics. You need courage to demand it anyway." The room went silent, then erupted in applause. Not polite, not scripted, raw. By the afternoon, 3 major news networks had retracted their headlines. Even Senator Grant, who sent the initial warning, tweeted, "Power doesn't come from being flawless, it comes from refusing to be fake." The signing ceremony proceeded on schedule. Elijah wore a gray 3-piece suit. Jenna wore a dark green dress with no brand tag and the same flats she'd worn to work 6 years ago. The documents were presented. Officials shook hands. But right before placing her pen on the page, Jenna spoke again, off script. "This isn't the end of the story. It's just the part where we make the mirror permanent. And if we're ever tempted to use it just for show, I hope someone has the courage to write another napkin, maybe about me." Then she signed. As the ink dried, Elijah turned toward her and whispered, "You know you just gave them permission to hold you accountable." Jenna nodded. "That's the only kind of power worth having." 3 days later, the National Ethics Charter took effect, and REDLOCK became mandatory protocol for all federally subsidized corporate contracts above $50 ESG fund recipients managing more than $100 in assets, and every city seeking new federal ethics partnership certifications. But more than that, it became a culture shift. Companies stopped performing. Startups began designing policies with transparency rehearsals. Staff began citing REDLOCK not as a threat, but a tool. Back at Harbor Vest, Jenna returned to her usual role. Quiet leadership, no spotlight. Until one day, she received a package. Inside was a napkin, this time written in sharp blue ink. "I used to cover for him. I saw you get blamed. I'm sorry it took me 7 years to say it. You were right." Initialed, C.W. Chad Winslow. Jenna smiled, folded the napkin slowly, and tucked it next to the original one. Both stained, both real, both proof that sometimes the system doesn't clear your name. You do. Geneva was colder than Jenna expected. Even in spring, the wind off the lake cut through her coat like ice. The city felt polished, detached, like everything had been arranged for show. She didn't like that, but she wasn't here to like anything. She was here to defend REDLOCK. And, more importantly, to prove that ethics wasn't an American gimmick, it was a global standard worth protecting. Inside the UN hall, the pressure was real. Representatives from 14 countries were in attendance. The Global Business Standards Forum had just voted to review REDLOCK's expansion into Europe and Asia. Not everyone was happy. Some called it surveillance capitalism. Others said it exported American moralism under the guise of transparency. One CEO from a Swiss conglomerate said outright, "We do not need your emotional politics or social scoring." Jenna didn't flinch. She just smiled. When her turn came to speak, she didn't use her slides. She told a story. 5 years ago, I worked in a restaurant where the best thing I had was a pen and a napkin. I didn't write a complaint. I wrote a warning, and that warning became a seed, a system, a shield, not for me, but for the ones who still serve in silence. REDLOCK doesn't tell you how to treat people. It just records what you already do and asks if you're proud of it. The room stayed quiet, but the silence was different this time. Not cold, just attentive. Afterward, 2 delegates approached her quietly. One was from Brazil, the other from South Korea. They didn't say much, just handed her their cards. "We'd like to pilot REDLOCK in municipal systems, not because of the data, because of the people." By the second day of the summit, Jenna had met with 9 different nations. Not everyone agreed, but many were starting to ask the right questions. How do we adapt this ethically to our labor cultures? What would a REDLOCK audit look like in a textile factory? Can the AI be localized to recognize emotional cues across languages? She took notes, a lot of them, because she didn't come to sell a system. She came to build a shared one. On the final day, she walked out to the lake just before sunrise. Elijah called. "Report card?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Too early to say, but I think we just stopped being an American tool." "You ever think," he said, "how crazy it is? One napkin, now it's global policy." She looked across the water. "No," she said. "What's crazy is how long people accepted less. All we did was hold up a mirror." Back in her hotel room, she found an envelope under the door. No logo, no sender. Inside, a folded receipt from a cafe 2 blocks away. On the back, handwritten in French, "We saw your talk. My daughter is a server. Thank you for reminding the world that small voices matter." Initialed CD. Jenna folded it slowly, slipped it beside the napkin. One more voice, one more country, one more sign the world was waking up. By the end of the quarter, REDLOCK was everywhere, across federal contracts, private equity ethics screening, even in university dining halls, not as punishment, but as proof that people were finally watching what had always been ignored. Jenna Holt had become the reluctant face of a movement. She didn't want it, not out of fear, but because she believed the work should belong to everyone, or it would mean nothing. Still, the offers rolled in. One morning in May, her assistant brought in a sealed folder, thick cream cardstock, government seal. Inside, a formal letter from the Office of Global Ethics Commission. "We invite Ms. Jenna Holt to serve as founding director for the REDLOCK Global Authority. A 6-year term. Salary, high 7 figures. Full relocation package to Geneva." She didn't smile. She didn't react at all. She just closed the folder, took a breath, and whispered, "No." Elijah didn't believe her at first. "You turned down a global ethics seat?" He blinked, clearly expecting the punchline. She nodded. "I'm not building an empire. I was just holding the mirror." He sat back, studying her. "You know this won't make sense to people." "Then maybe," she said gently, "they were never the ones I wrote the napkin for." Instead of packing for Geneva, Jenna took a trip back home. Not to the city, but to the diner where it all began. Bridgepoint Cafe, now under new ownership. Still smelled like burnt coffee and lemon soap. She walked in slowly, wearing jeans and a windbreaker. No entourage, no fanfare. A teenage hostess glanced up from her phone, then did a double take. "Oh my God," the girl whispered. Wait, are you her?" Jenna smiled. "I used to work here, a long time ago." They let her sit at the counter. Same seat where she used to take her 5-minute breaks between shifts. The new manager came out and offered her a free meal. She declined. "I'd rather pay," she said. "Makes it real." Halfway through her coffee, a young server approached. Shy, maybe 19. Nervous hands. Name tag said Maya. She hesitated, then held out something folded. A napkin, not written on. Just offered. Jenna looked up. Maya spoke quietly. "I don't know what I'd write on it yet, but I figured maybe you'd know when I do." Jenna's throat tightened. She took the napkin, folded it again, and whispered, "When you're ready, write it loud." The next morning, Jenna published an open letter. Not on TV, not through a PR firm, just on a plain text blog, posted at 5:12 a.m. No headline, no logo, just this. "I'm not taking the seat. I'm taking the mirror back to where it belongs, in the hands of those who see what we pretend not to." I didn't create Redlock. I created space for someone to finally say, "That's not okay." And I will never let this system be turned into a throne, because ethics can't be ruled, only revealed. Let this be a reminder, not of power, but of choice. You don't need a title to hold someone accountable. You don't need a suit to protect what's right. You just need one clear moment where you don't stay silent. Write your napkin, pass it on, burn the old system if you have to, but don't ever forget, the seat you give up might be the one someone else finally sits in with dignity. JH. The post went viral in 6 hours, translated into 19 languages within 3 days. The global position she declined? Now split among 5 ethics ambassadors from 5 different continents. Each one had a different story, a different voice, and all of them carried one item on their first day: a folded napkin. Back in her apartment, Jenna sat alone on the floor of her living room. No shoes, no press. Just a small glass box beside her. Inside, 6 napkins. Each one marked a moment. One from Elijah, stained with coffee and the words, "I see you." One from Maya, blank, waiting. One from Chad Winslow, the apology. One from the Brazilian delegate. One from her own first note, the original spark. And one from herself, new, just written. "I'm not done. I'm just quieter now. Because silence, when chosen, can be strength, not survival." As the sun faded through the window, she stood, folded the box closed, placed it on a shelf, and then walked into the world again. No badge, no crown, just someone who had the courage to notice what others ignored, and the wisdom to step aside when the work needed to go on without her. You ever had a moment like that? Where someone saw you, really saw you, when the world looked right past you? Tell us where you're watching from. And, more importantly, if you had one napkin to write the truth, what would it say? Let us know in the comments. And remember, dignity doesn't need a title. It just needs a voice. This has been a Telltales story. We'll see you in the next one.